I'm literally going close to the screen. This is not my skin color, like at all. And well, people will be like, this bitch is talking about colorism.
Like this. She's talking about all that melanin. Where is that melanin?
Where's my damn melanin, sis? Here I am. First and foremost, congratulations on having this platform. It's a much needed platform. To your point, I've also witnessed the same thing through social media, that a lot of the times, majority of the views, majority of the likes are geared toward people that post things that are quote unquote pretty.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to navigate that space because there are so many women that have talents, that have skills that they want to display, that they want to share, but it kind of gets lost in the sauce that we call social media, right? And understandably so, that's the way humans work, but it's definitely much needed that you have a platform that is displaying diversified stories rather than what we're accustomed to seeing or what our search engines want us to see. So thank you so much for creating such a much needed platform. But yeah, I published my book, Taming the Lion, in December 2018, late December 2018. It was a goal that I had for a very long time. I finally one day decided to compile all the poems that I've written over the years and put it in a book called Taming the Lion. So it's definitely been an incredible journey for me.
So let's talk about your writing journey. How did your writing journey start and when did it start?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I've been writing since I was 7 years old. I've always loved writing. That was something that I've just always been naturally good at. I think a lot of it is because I identified writing as being a form of art that is uninterrupted. So if you are trying to speak to someone about your feelings, you always run the risk of being interrupted, right? Because that person as well has the ability to speak back to you. So writing was a form that I was able to identify that I could say everything I need to say without running the risk of someone interrupting my train of thought or interrupting the process that I'm using to either heal, share my emotions, or whatever the intention of me writing was. And so I've been writing since I was 7 years old, and it was like short stories, essays, poems, of course. And so fast forward to about, I would say like 2016 is when I started posting my poems on Instagram in a very similar format to how Rupi Kaur posted her poems, with the minimalist black and white type of posting. And, huge kudos to her, because she was able to popularize poetry to a point where it actually became something that people weren't afraid of posting anymore. Just because there's just so much weird perception surrounding poetry, right? Like people think that if you're a poet, you're like Edgar Allan Poe's disciple or something weird like that. And you can be totally just a normal person, whatever normal is defined as, but just be a regular run-of-the-mill person that just has a talent or has a love for writing poetry. So kudos to her, but I started posting in like 2016, and I just got so many amazing messages about what I was posting, how people were able to identify what I was writing about. I got some girls that also said, hey, your poem spoke to me. I need some advice on a situation that I'm facing. And I was able to give them advice. And fast forward to, I would say like October 2018, one of my really good friends was like, why don't you write a book? What's the holdup? And it just dinged to me. I just compiled all my books into a template, and I was able to publish it within 2 months.
Wow.
But it was,
you already had these poems that's just like playing around in your little portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. So I had this like portfolio of all these poems, and so I had the content. It was just about how to chronicleize the poems in my book.
Yeah.
And if you read my book or have come across my book, you'll see that the first poem is titled You. And it goes, who were you before they told you who you couldn't be? So that's the first poem. And the last poem, after I complete all these other poems in between, the last poem is titled Me, where I say, how many portraits of me did you paint before you realized you were using the wrong colors? So it really is just a conversation between you and me and the collective healing process that goes into both of us. So that's why I was very careful with putting my poems in a order that was very sequential, that started with you all the way to me, and everything in between were just conversations that you and I had with one another. So that's what really took the 2 months. But other than that, I already have the concept there.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I haven't read the book yet. I haven't read all the poetry, but I did come across the titles, and I was like, these titles are just very catchy, you know. Even in the summary, it talks about, you know, the book is about finding your self-worth, healing, and like feeling inspired, which is very fitting with what being invincible is, you know. Yeah. It's all about empowering women, you know. So let's talk about, like, what were you, so this was you had written all this, I'm assuming, throughout your life, you know, your journey, what you probably encountered.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, all of my poems are based on some real stuff, things that I was facing at the moment, things that I was recalling. It's really important to recognize that Taming the Lion, even though it had success, and I'm very proud of that, but it was more so a healing story about myself. And the thing is that I always say this when people ask, like, oh, some of these poems are a little too deep, right? They're a little too revealing about yourself. But the whole point of it is that healed is a result. And that's what people always like to show. They always like to show, like, me being healed. This is the final result of me, you know, healing, because healing in and of itself is a very ugly and long process. Yeah. And all of these poems are kind of about that process and the different barriers that I face, the different challenges that I face. Obviously, I mean, none of us can safely say we're ever 100% healed, right? There are different things that inform our decision-making, conscious and unconscious. But my book was more of, like, at that time, I wanted to frame it in a manner. I wasn't married at the time, so I obviously still could talk to a lot of, like, heartbreak, a lot of loss, whether it was loss of life, loss of love, loss of a way of life that I had grown used to. There was just so many different losses that the book could speak to. And, you know, at that time, I was definitely trying to just heal from the concept of feeling lost or feeling like I've lost something that I can never gain back. And it's still a journey, right? It's definitely, like, just because I wrote the book, I'm like, okay now, you know, that's definitely not what it is. It's definitely a journey for sure. Like all my artwork.
Yeah. Oh, do you also paint? Is that a painting? I can't really tell.
Heck no, I don't paint. Are you serious? these are all like, yeah, I can show you.
Oh, I see, the Taming the Lion.
Yeah, that's Frida Kahlo. That's my book, and then that's the painting I got off Etsy. Yeah.
Perfect. You know, I was gonna actually, I was gonna ask you about your Taming the Lion cover, because, you know, it's a lion and I see some butterflies and then I see, like, the, you know, our culture in it, like the nose ring. I don't know what it's actually called, but, you know, the nose ring. Yeah. So what was the, you know, creativity behind that? Like, what was the thought process behind that book cover?
Yeah. So originally what I wanted to do was, because it's important to know the original concept, right? Originally, I wanted to have, like, a shark, like, you know, in the Jaws movie cover, there's a shark coming out. So I wanted to have that with the nose ring, but that just, like, a shark's nose is a little button, so it looks so weird. So that obviously did not work. So then I thought, okay, like, what's another very scary animal that's scared, that's majestic, that is just
Feared.
Yeah, feared, exactly, like a feared animal. And I thought of a lion. So the lion is very iconic to South Asian culture, of course, like the tiger, the lion, the sea lion. So I put that on the cover. And then I also wanted to show that no matter how strong you perceive yourself to be, or majestic or feared you believe you are, there's always something to ground you. So that's why I decided to put the nose ring, because it's very, not to say like if you have a nose ring, you're considered like submissive, nothing like that. It was more of, I just wanted to show a form of me being strong, but also me feeling grounded by my culture, by the things that I'm proud of when it comes to. A lot of the poems in my book also talk about colorism within our community, right? That's something that has been very traumatizing to me specifically. So I spoke to that quite a bit. So I wanted to kind of show, okay, like these are things I recognize within my culture that are kind of grounding me, but I also want to change. And this is me being like a feared individual or animal that is also cognizant of the background that I come from. So that's kind of like the analogy that I was going for with the cover. Yeah.
Let's talk about maybe a little bit of colorism. You know, that's something that a lot of people I feel like can relate to. I know I can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like now it's changing with our generation.
Thank God.
Thank God, yes. Even now, I still see people back home using like Fair and Lovely. I'm like, that's not going to make
Oh gosh. Yeah, it is. I mean, kudos to this next generation for being allowed to play outside without somebody saying, oh, don't play in the sun, you'll get dark, right? Because I definitely grew up hearing those things. I wasn't allowed to go outside past a certain time because, or before a certain time, because the sun would make me dark. And I grew up with that. And it's very traumatizing because you really internalize those things as you grow older. And so I definitely think colorism, of course, is a byproduct of colonialism. There really isn't any other explanation for why we are so obsessed with being fair, especially considering like our proximity to the equator. We're supposed to be a little darker because of how close we are to the equator. And that's a scientific fact, right? That's just how evolution works over time. So yeah, I definitely see that. I'm so sad that other individuals, the older generation, don't recognize that, but it's definitely something that we've inherited that we really got to try to work against, for sure.
I was mentioning how, you know, having the courage to be vulnerable and like, you know, putting yourself out there, putting your story out there, you know, because, you know, you don't want to be judged or like conceived in a wrong way, you know? Mm-hmm. Perception is a very big thing. So thank you for actually putting your story there, because I feel like a lot of people can relate to it. And actually, when you can relate to somebody, it is part of a healing process too. Like if I'm going through something, I like to hear someone who went through something similar and how they kind of like overcame it. So I think that's a very helpful, something very helpful to have in a book if someone is interested in reading, you know, how to overcome something that they're going through currently. I don't know if you have your book in front of you, but I would love for you to read maybe one poem, maybe even I think one of your poems named is Taming the Lion, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do have it, which is great. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that. So I just flipped it to a random page, but this poem is called Truth or Dare. It is, God and I play truth or dare. He knows my truths already, and he dares me with them daily. This is another one that I flipped through. My poems are actually they're like haiku sort of poems. They're very short, and none of them go longer than a page. But the next one is called Daughters and Fathers. You cannot demand for strong daughters when you like their mothers to be weak.
Oh, yeah, that runs home.
Of course, talking about South Asian culture, right? It's definitely, this is another one called Father Feminism. My father taught me feminism when he taught me that I am more before they started teaching me that I was less. So definitely a lot of themes surrounding validating yourself as a woman, not just as a woman, but as a South Asian woman. I think that intersectionality is so important to address, especially when you're talking about women's rights and the value of a woman within different parts of society. So I definitely wanted to speak to that in my book. For sure.
Yeah, and I think just growing up as a South Asian, I'm sure everyone has different ways of how they grew up, but like, I mean, it's a very general thing for like South Asian girls, you know, and South Asian boys being raised a little differently, you know, we're not equally, you know, not treated, but like, you know, obviously I feel like a lot of South Asian boys in the household have a little bit more freedom to do whatever they like instead of the girls.
Yeah, it's very scary to think about the logic behind why that even is a thing, right? Like, I grew up with 3 brothers. I was very fortunate for my dad to be he didn't co-sign with all that cultural BS that we see nowadays, where like the girl has to stay at home, but the brothers can do whatever the heck they want to do. So I'm very grateful for that. But definitely seeing a lot of my friends have to deal with them carrying this burden that is quite frankly not even theirs. It's just a burden that society has given them, but it's way too heavy to carry. So yeah, there's definitely a double standard when it comes to women and men in our society, and just like raising sons versus daughters, right? People, and we're definitely going away from this in our generation, which is amazing. But when I was growing up, yeah, absolutely. Like there was some stuff you internalized, right? Like, oh, women can't talk loud, women can't laugh loudly, women can't wear this, that, and the third, just because you always were like taught to make yourself small, to make yourself somebody that is there, but isn't really being seen. And it's across South Asian culture. That's some of the stuff about our culture that I really wish we could change immediately, rather than just waiting for the process of it changing. But the work is definitely in there. I think now we definitely are going away from that train of thought and starting to really demand equal spaces for both genders.
So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, we did touch up on it, like healing after relationships and identifying your worth as a woman, here you say, especially in the context of South Asian culture. So what did you mean by that exactly?
So, you know, again, the whole entire concept when it comes to healing, people are very interested in the result of being healed. They don't really have the tools that are necessary to go through the healing process. A lot of that is by what our society is now on social media, which is a platform that people use to connect with one another. You're just bombarded by positive imagery, right? Like your before and after. There's nothing to speak about the in between. It's all just final products rather than the process that goes into that. So I think a lot of South Asian culture is all about that, right? Like you're nothing until you have the MD, or you're nothing until you get your education. And it's really hard for women specifically to identify who to talk to if they want to begin the healing process, right? And I say this all the time. One of the worst things that you could feel isn't the emotion itself. It's feeling like you're alone in that emotion, feeling like there's nobody that is feeling the same way that you do, when in actuality, there's so many people that feel that way. People just don't want to share that, right? And that's across all cultures, not just South Asian culture. Because as humans, we just want to make ourselves seem as unhuman-like as possible, when part of being human is making mistakes and going through ugly processes and doing all the things that really make us people. So I just wanted to be a source for women, especially that are dealing with things that don't really have an immediate solution, that they recognize there are a lot of other barriers to heal. For example, their culture, their parents, which is a huge thing, by the way. And, you know, family structure, the communities that they live in, religious issues. I just wanted it to be very well known that there are women that feel the same way that others are feeling. And not just exclusive to women, right? Like there's a lot of emotions that men mirror as well that we women face being South Asian. Like the whole concept of being the best you can be, that's not exclusive to South Asian women. I mean, men are always pressured to be, if you're a doctor, don't be an internal doctor, be like a neural freaking surgeon, you know, that it's always wanting more. And I think that's definitely something that not just women face, but South Asian.
Yeah, or like comparing your kids and like you have to be a doctor. All
oh my God, yeah.
Pressure from a very, very young age, I would say. And right. I feel like now actually in the social media world, a lot of South Asia, there's like a community, you know, I follow a couple of South Asian women who talk about, you know, growing up in a South Asian household, how important now it is to kind of look for help, like seek therapy, you know, because believe it or not, a lot of our choices and decisions that we make as an adult is based on our journey from our childhood, you know, what we're surrounded by, what we heard all our life from our parents, you know, all of that actually plays a huge role in our decision today. Or like, you know, our fears or our internal anxiety, like they're stemming from it, right? And I feel like there is a stigma about seeking therapy. I always say, like, you don't have to seek, it's like you said, healing is a process, you know, it's a continuous process, you know, and seeking therapy is not only when you're going through something specifically, it could just be, you know, a process.
Yeah, very, very true. It's a very ugly, long process, right? And healing also encompasses this whole gamut of issues that comes from unlearning what you have been conditioned to believe all your life. For example, for myself, I just through various things, I was conditioned for a very long time to believe, like, as a wife, I'm not allowed to say anything, like what my husband says goes. And it's not something that I observed in my parents' because anyone who meets my mom knows my mom is a very strong woman. But it was something that I internalized from watching Bollywood movies and all these different things that kind of show you, oh yeah, as a woman, you have to make yourself as small as possible. So you're small and don't really be seen, but also be seen type of thing. And like, thank God I was able to marry somebody that was able to show me, no, that's complete, like, that's not at all true. You have a voice, you have an opinion. Like, of course, there's a certain art when it comes to communicating that, but it was a lot that I had to unlearn, and it's definitely something that I'm still unlearning. I don't like how we have this narrative amongst ourselves, the South Asian women, that, oh, like, you can't move anywhere in life unless you fully heal, or you have to be some like super clean girl to deserve happiness. That's not at all true. Like, people are very complicated individuals that have a whole entire life history prior to achieving what they want. And even when you achieve what you want, there's still so much that goes into, okay, like me being married, there's a lot of stuff that comes out, me being married now, that I'm like, all right, I know this is not because of the situation. I know it's because of something else that's informing me to act this way, and having really honest, tough conversations with yourself about where those things and where those emotions come from, that really can assist you in healing overall and just being a better version of you.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, you know, any kind of relationship, it could be with your parents or your partnership. Open communication is so important, right?
It is.
If you're thinking, what you're feeling, you need to communicate that, or else everything is just what they just, I guess, assume, you know, you don't want that. It's very important to kind of understand and see what the other person is thinking.
I also received like some controversial remarks about my book, right? And I think it's very important to address that, because I was definitely speaking on themes that were uncomfortable for a lot of the Muslim and South Asian community, especially here in Michigan, because it's not conservative, but it's definitely not liberal. You know, it's very middle of the road. I wasn't really talking about like insanely liberal topics. That's not at all what it was. It was just, I was bringing forth conversations that had not taken place just yet, were very important conversations to have. But, you know, for things to be labeled controversial, there has to be somebody that's setting the standard then. Who is that somebody, right? So I wanted to make it very well known that this is not controversial stuff. This is stuff that is happening in real time and people that are going through the stuff that you're labeling as controversial. So to label something controversial, honestly, in our community, whatever it may be about, it's really minimizing what people have to endure, because it takes away from like normal human experience. Personally, for me, I hate the word controversial, for real.
Yeah.
Because it's really like, who's setting that standard of what's considered normal then?
You know, I feel like I always say this, being like a social media personality, you need to have a tough skin. You know, I feel like all the influencers, you know, they open up their life and they share their life with, you know, the whole world. And there are people like who are criticizing, commenting, and I'm just like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
It's trolls with like nothing on their profiles. You know, they just take advantage of that. Like being like a ghost follower or whatever to bring people down, and that's really sad.
It really is sad. I as somebody who's definitely been subject to like whatever the term is, cyberbullying, right? It's a very sad action individuals decide to take upon themselves to do, because it really is coming from a place of your own issues, right? If you're concealing yourself as a ghost follower and you're hoping that where you're shooting is going to hurt the person, it's really like, okay, you're concealing your own identity to accomplish a goal, and it's like you've removed your own personal self from it, and it's all about like your own hurt feelings. So a lot of the comments that I received, I just take with a grain of salt. Like, it's too heavy of a burden to carry somebody else's issues, you know, with themselves, right? It's not, you're right, you have to have a really thick skin to be part of social media and to be so prominent on social media, because people are just ruthless out here for no reason. For what? Like, it's the craziest thing. I mean, they will never say that to somebody's face. I know that for certain. I know
they're behind, you know, a phone or like whatever, laptop, and getting all these information out there. And when you sit and think about it, it's like, what leads a person to do that, right? And it has to come from like something that they are dealing with in their life, probably not happy, right? And which is fine. A lot of us are, you know, we find ourselves in some times in our life that we're not happy, right? But that's not a way of kind of like letting it out on someone else.
There's so many different methods of calling someone out, you know, like if it really, because for me, I don't care what you do as long as it doesn't hurt children and the elderly. Other than that, I really don't care what you do, right? Or like if you're taking away the rights of another individual, of course, then you should call that person out. But if like somebody cut in line in 2002 and you still hold like drama for it, that's a problem, right? And that's what I consider like all these comments to be. Just some really weird, like obscure issue that people hope one day lands them on TMZ. It's really weird, like how people think this is real life. Like social media is not real life, okay? Like, it's definitely a great platform, but it's
all of us choose what we put out there, right? And I always I'm like, everyone's dealing with something in their life, you know, being people. Just because they're showing their happy moments does not mean like they don't have anything going on in their life. Everyone's choosing what they want to show, right?
Absolutely, and you know, you were asking me when's the time that I felt invincible, or what is being invincible feel like, and just going back to our conversation about social media, I published my book in late December 2018, and I was on top of the world. I was being flown out to talk about my book. I was doing book signings. I was getting paid for speaking about my book. My book was being used in colleges. I was just so much success, and I was displaying all of that success on social media until one day, what was it? It had to have been like early December 2019, we got very disappointing news about my little brother, health-wise. And thank God he's okay. But like at that time, I was just dealing with so much. And on social media, it just seemed like I was living this perfect life, when in actuality, it was, I mean, it was hell on earth for me, because we were so worried. So a lot of this social media stuff is just really like, everybody is displaying the best parts of themselves, and that's just how we are as humans. But I really wish that more individuals would be a little bit more vulnerable to let people know that, hey, like, it's normal to feel bad. It's normal to feel like you don't want to go to the party today. It's normal for you to, you know, feel like you don't belong to something or feel like an outsider. And nobody wants to speak to that anymore, which I think is really freaking cool that when people do, because it's so rare nowadays.
Yeah, it is rare. You know, it's not, people are not being open, or whatever the case may be. I feel like some people are not comfortable, but it's so important, I feel like, to be just vulnerable and respectfully.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I am going through something, you know, and just be kind,
Right.
because you don't know what everyone's going through, right?
Yeah. No, that's real. That's very real. There's a lot of stuff people go through that people don't talk about, man. It's one of the most heartwarming messages that I ever got for something that I had posted was a girl that messaged me. She did not even, I had no clue who she was. She had no idea who I personally was. And she messaged me and she said, you know, I was in a very, very dark place, and I just happened to come across one of your poems. It was the one that I read earlier about truth or dare, and God, you know, dares me with my truths daily. And she actually was a victim of sexual abuse, and she was starting to identify that she really needed therapy. She just wasn't receiving the type of support that she needed to take her to that step. And she read that poem about God daring you with your truths. And she said, you know, I was able to take that truth, me being a victim of sexual abuse, and being able to say, okay, God, this is what you have given me, and this is what I need to do to heal. And that was one of the greatest messages that I've ever received about anything that I've written. If at all, like, any of my words can help, whether it's a woman or a man, a boy or a girl, whoever, I don't care. If it helps them just a little bit to feel a little bit of comfort in this crazy, crazy world, and that means the world to me. You know, that's exactly why I post my poems. A lot of it is personal stuff that a lot of us are very scared to talk about, but I took that risk knowing that there are others that are dealing with the same type of stuff on a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis. And it's definitely been, you know, I've received so much love for what I post, and I've given so much love because of what I post. People just saying, hey, it relates to me, it spoke to me, it helped me, it brought me to tears, whatever it did. I'm so grateful for that. When I published my book, Taming the Lion, and I received such an outpour of not just support, but just in general love, I felt invincible, because it wasn't just my story anymore. It was everybody that gave me love and support. It was also their story. So I felt like, I felt, even though my name was on the cover of the book, it still made me feel invincible enough that it was also everybody else's name on the cover of the book. It was not just dedicated to who I dedicated it to, but to everybody that it related to. So being invincible really means to me that you're able to put out there something that people relate to enough that it really humanizes your process and their process, and just makes it whole. And yeah, anything that I put out that receives any sort of like love and support makes me feel good, and that's what makes me feel invincible, to be honest.
That's awesome. Yeah. When we can relate to someone else's story, that itself, it's like, you know, you share this bond right there and then, right? And if you can make an impact, or, you know, help someone, whether it's by your writing or other ways, you know, it just feels like you're doing something right, that you're able to help somebody else, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I just love I just love the support I've received. Like for, even though I kind of went on a hiatus for an entire year, when I published when I posted a poem after that hiatus, I just received such an outpour. Like, oh my God, where have you been? Whatever, blah, 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 what's going down? And I was like, dude, this is so cool. Like, I feel like a celebrity, but I also feel like a shaman low key, because I'm just like healing the masses and letting people know, hey, it's okay to go through this. Like, it's fine. It's not, I understand we're bombarded with all these like Instagram baddies, but it's also cool to be like a person that's like, hey, I'm going through it, like humanizing healing. It's important. It's necessary and important. And Rahfa, your platform does that too, though. Like, yeah. Again, kudos to you. This is something that we need, and please continue to do it. Like, even if you need to give yourself a break, because putting stuff like this out there is very exhausting.
I do have to give a shout out to my South Asian women. I feel like they're always, responding back to me. But
girl, of course. I mean, hey, this is like, we are not in a society anymore where we should be tearing each other down. Like, I will never take it upon myself to tear another brown woman down for what? Like, we are all facing the same type of atrocities that the other is facing, whether it be because of colorism, racism, bigotry, whatever it is. All of us have this collective struggle. So we do not need to be ripping each other down. Like, any opportunity that I could have to support my fellow brown women, whatever it may be, whatever their passions are, I'm all for it. Like, we definitely got to stop tearing each other down and building each other up. This is the time to do it. Like, there's no better time than now to do that.
When I see other brown women succeeding, I'm like, you probably don't even know who I am, but I'm like cheerleading for you.
That's what I'm saying. I love to see it. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I love to see it. Every time, like, I don't even watch Bridgerton, but like, when the main character of Bridgerton is South Indian, I'm South Indian Muslim, right? And she's South Indian. I think her parents are from Tamil Nadu or something like that. Yo, that warmed my heart so much. I don't even watch the show, but I just love to see the representation. Like, brown woman excellence, give it to me all day. That's what I live for. That's what I thrive on.
I love to see it too. And I'm like, a lot of people representation matters, and
it does.
Now I feel like at least a younger generation can find something that even us, like when I see them, like, oh yeah, that's something like, that's normal that I could not relate to that Bridgerton, I guess, thing, but when you just see people like you on screen. Because growing up, I guess we haven't seen that other than Bollywood, right? But in like, American television, we've never seen that.
Bollywood only features fair and lovely women, right? They're really like Bollywood had the audacity to say that the actress Kajol is considered dark. No, she's not. Like, she's on the scale of brownness, she's on one end. Like, she's not that dark, So it's very strange for me as well. It's something that I have to get accustomed to. But like, circling back to my point, there's a lot we have to unlearn. Like, we are, as brown women, regardless of what our shade is, we're beautiful, for God's sake. I mean, from our hair to our features, we're gorgeous. We're gorgeous. And the fact that, like, English entertainment is able to recognize that before our own people's entertainment is wild to me. I mean, we're taught from our own people that we are ugly, but out here we have like Chad, Michael, and Charlie telling us we're the most gorgeous people they've ever seen. And it's refreshing. It's definitely refreshing. It'd be your own sometimes, sis. It'd be your own.
But no, I'm so excited to see like more representation. So what's next for Aishah? Like, are you reading another book anytime soon? Are we going to see another one?
So, what's really interesting is I definitely do want to continue writing poetry, but not to like rain on your parade right now. But I was actually thinking of doing a podcast too, like my own, kind of like discussing my own healing process and stuff. So definitely that's something that's on the horizon one day, probably not anytime soon.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a goal that I have for myself. And Continuing to write, continuing to post. Right now, I'm definitely passionate about what's happening in India amongst Muslims. So I'm definitely trying to use my platform to post as much as I can about that because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart right now. But continuing to write about that and just, healing in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, if you have a podcast, I would love to, listen to it and tune into it.
Oh God, it would be wild. I'm just like, I am so tame right now. I am very tame on, this, and I've definitely been very tame on like other platforms that I've been interviewed on or I've like spoken to. Yeah. But I don't know, if I have my own podcast, I think I'll probably get canceled really quickly.
Thank you so much, Aishah, for doing this.
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much for interviewing me, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?